Well, I would say that 5% is ability and 95% is what's between your ears. And the most successful athletes in the world have that other 95%. And when you get to the highest levels, everybody can play. Everybody can skate. Everybody can pass. Everybody can shoot, all that. And what separates the average guys from the elite guys is mental attitude, mental health, all that stuff, right? Because I had faced a lot of adversity early on in life, it built a lot of resilience in me. And that resilience is what carried me through my whole entire life.
Welcome to the Midland Money Mindset. This is a podcast that's all about getting your mind right when it comes to all things money. In every episode, we go deep with engaging guests who provide tangible takeaways and a whole lot of joy along the way. I hope you enjoy these conversations as much as I enjoyed having them. Let's dive into today's show. I'm Larry Sprung, your host for the Midland Money Mindset and founder and wealth advisor of Midland Financial. Today's guest is Theo Fleury, former NHL All-star, Olympic Gold Medalist, Stanley Cup winner, and currently the president of Fleury 14. Theo Fleury had the opportunity to have a long career in the NHL. He had a 15-year career logging over 1,000 games and 1,000 points. His hockey resume also includes 7 All-Star appearances, an Olympic gold medal, and a Stanley Cup. Theo enjoys all of his hockey memories and accolades, but also takes a great deal of pride in what he does today. Theo's mission statement is to help as many people get to where they want to go. It has taken shape in many forms, whether meeting people for a brief moment on the street or as a dynamic, inspirational speaker with the intention of creating healing through conversation. His compassionate spirit allows others to feel safe and whole through experiencing his own vulnerability. Theo has been awarded the Canadian Humanitarian Award, the Queen's Jubilee Medallion, and is an honorary chief and recipient of the Aboriginal Inspire Award. In 2014, Theo was awarded with an honorary doctorate in science from the University of Guelph, Humber, for outstanding contributions to the mental health of Canadians. Most recently, Theo was bestowed with a second honorary doctorate in laws from Brandon University in recognition for his contributions combating child sex abuse and for his outstanding efforts to promote healing and recovery. Listen in and hear about Theo's time playing hockey and battling his own demons, how that has led him to a path to help others and himself pursue excellence in all areas of life. Well, hello, everybody. Larry Sprung here, and I have the awesome pleasure of being with one of my favorite players from the NHL, Theo Fleury, former NHL All-star, Olympic gold medalist, and currently the president of Fleury 14. Thanks for joining us today, Theo.
Yeah, thanks, Larry. Thanks for asking me to do this.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you here. Just for those people who may not be NHL fans or remember, thankfully I do, so I'm kind of dating myself, I guess, to some degree. But can you tell our listeners about your path to the NHL? How did that take place?
Oh, man. It's a long story for sure. I started playing hockey when I was 5 years old. And almost immediately from the first time I stepped on the ice, I fell madly and deeply in love with the game of hockey. And not only was it fun, but I was really good at it. And so I would say the majority of my childhood was spent playing hockey, but also playing lots of other sports as well. And I love the camaraderie. I loved being part of a team. I loved winning, and I grew up in a small town in Manitoba where, if you had a set of hockey gear and you were 6 years old, guess what? You're on the team because we didn't have enough players. And so I ended up playing with the same 13 guys for about 9 years. We played together and we had the same 3 coaches for that whole entire time.
Wow.
And yeah, we created this amazing winning environment. And, it was built on respect and love and caring for teammates and consequences. And yeah, it was amazing. And then up in Canada, we have a league called the Canadian Hockey League. And that's where 65% of all NHLers come from. And when I was 14, I got drafted into that league. And then a couple years later, I made my debut in the Western Hockey League with the Moose Jaw Warriors. And yeah, and then basically the rest is history. Got drafted in 1987 by the Calgary Flames. Played my first game in the NHL January 1st, 1989. 6 months later, was carrying the Stanley Cup around the Montreal Forum. And and then I played 1,000 games, had 1,000 points, was part of some really great teams, along the way. But more importantly, I played for Canada 10 times in my career, which is probably the majority of my highlights in hockey come from those experiences. I was captain of Canada's national junior team in 1988, and we won the World Junior in Moscow.
Right.
1991, won a Canada Cup, which is now the World Cup of Hockey. And then in 2002, topped it all off with winning a gold medal at the Olympics in Salt Lake City. So, yeah, it was, everything I have in this life has been given to me, from the game of hockey. And I'm very, very blessed and very fortunate to, like I said, to have had so many incredible experiences in the game and been around some of the greatest leaders, our sport has ever produced, and learned a lot from their type of leadership, and, have carried those lessons into my life as, like you said, the president of Fleury 14.
Right. Was your love of hockey, did it basically come from the fact that you lived where you lived, or was there somebody that kind of gave you the bug for hockey to kind of get you first started? How'd that all start?
Well, my dad was an incredible hockey player as well. So 1963, he was signed by the New York Rangers, if you can believe that. And the summer before he was going to training camp, he was playing in a baseball game and broke his leg in that game. And so his dream of playing in the NHL was figuratively and literally shattered that day.
Wow.
Both my parents struggled with addiction. And so I grew up in a home that was very chaotic and sometimes violent and all that. And so the rink was my escape from there. And so that's why I spent the majority of my time at the rink. Was I didn't have to be at home, and I didn't have to be in all this chaos and insanity that was going on. And that's where I really developed my God-given abilities and talents. And what's interesting was, I'm also an author as well. I've written a couple books that have done really well, but I read a book by a guy named Malcolm Gladwell.
Yeah, sure.
And it's called The Outliers.
Yes, sir. Great book.
And, in the book, there's a chapter that basically where he says, if you want to be the elite of the elite of the elite in whatever field we choose, we got to put in 10,000 hours. I remember reading that chapter in the book, and then I closed the book and I reflected on my childhood. And basically that's where my 10,000 hours happened, from the time I was 5 until I was 15, when I left home to pursue a professional hockey career. I'd put in those 10,000 hours of practice. And so in my sport, it's a very reactionary sport. And when I stepped on the ice, I didn't have to think. And, I think that's the biggest reason why I had so much success, was I didn't have to think about where I was supposed to be on the ice. And those 10,000 hours that I put in basically taught my body to react in whatever situation was going to be thrown at me on the ice.
Yeah, that's a great book. And I think there's a lot of great lessons out of that book. And that's certainly one of them, no matter what, whether it's, wanting to be in the NHL or being a baseball player or being a business person, you have to put in those 10,000 hours. I want to spend some time both on the personal side and on the business side, but I want to start on the hockey side. I want to start with the hockey and then move over to where you are today. Mm-hmm. You mentioned some of those highlights of your career, right? Being an all-star, Stanley Cup champion, gold medalist, etc. 1,000 games, which, was a huge milestone, 1,000 points, huge milestone in the NHL. So you've accomplished a lot. It seems like, from what you said earlier, though, one of your, I guess, most prideful moments is playing for Canada, for your country.
Yeah.
with all the great accomplishments in the NHL, why is playing for your country, I have an idea, but why is playing for your country so important and such a memorable thing for most people?
Well, as you know, in Canada, hockey's like religion. Okay.
This is true.
And those of us who've had the fortunate pleasure of playing for our country, we're considered like bishops, And whenever there's a big hockey tournament, whether that's the World Championships or World Cup of Hockey or Olympics or whatever it is, basically for those 2 weeks, the whole entire country shuts down. Okay. And they all head down to the liquor store and they buy their favorite beverage of choice. And they sit in front of their TVs for basically 2 weeks and cheer us on, because every kid's dream who plays hockey in Canada is to maybe one day put on that jersey and represent your country. So when I was 16, Hockey Canada, which is the governing body of all international hockey in Canada, they created a program called the Program of Excellence. And what they wanted to do was they wanted to get young people accustomed to playing international hockey. And so I was one of the first kids through this program. And there would be guys like Adam Graves would have been part of that program, Joe Sakic, Trevor Linden. So there was a lot of us that started in this program. And then obviously as you progressed, you got to play against international competition. So when I was 16, the Russians came over to Canada and they toured Canada. And so that was the very first time that I was able to put on that jersey. And I can tell you that the pride I felt was pretty incredible. And so I played under 17, under 18, 2 World Juniors, 2 World Championships, 2 World Cups of hockey, and 2 Olympic Games. And like I said, I got to travel. I got to see other places in the world.
Sure.
I learned more from traveling than I ever did sitting in a desk at school. And so, and this program, it has been consistent this whole entire time. And the World Junior Tournament, when it's held in Canada, is probably one of the biggest events of the year. And we have a major sports network here in Canada that covers it like top to bottom, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so, like I said, when you put on that jersey, not only you're representing your country and representing yourself, but you're also representing, the millions of hockey fans that there are in Canada. And in Canada, we don't play for silver medals or bronze medals. We only play for gold medals.
Right.
But, as an elite athlete, that's what you train your whole entire life for, is those opportunities to play in the biggest games and be a part of the biggest situations. And like I said, I had that opportunity 10 times in my career. And
it's amazing.
It was incredible.
Yeah, we've had the opportunity we have a place in Lake Placid. So at times when the World Juniors are held in Montreal, we usually, typically USA Canada will be right around New Year's.
It's New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
Every World Junior. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll head up there for the game and head back. And it's a great experience to watch at that level. Yeah. So I know it was a short tenure, but you did have a time with the New York Rangers, one of my favorite teams.
Yes.
So I got to ask you, what is one of your most memorable moments from being a New York Ranger?
Well, I just think the whole entire experience was pretty incredible. To put on the red, white, and blue of the Rangers, to play at Madison Square Garden 42 times a year, 41 times a year. And I don't think in my whole entire time as a NHL player that I got treated better as a athlete and as a human being than playing for the New York Rangers, first class organization. And, the fans were just, the best,
Right.
Like I said, to play at Madison Square Garden where people like the Rolling Stones and Muhammad Ali fought there, it's just like, the epic place to play. And then getting an opportunity to play with Mike Richter and Brian Leach and Adam Graves, Mark Messier, Mike York, Eric Lindros, it was a great experience. Unfortunately, we didn't have the success that we thought we should have.
Right.
And basically what I tell people is for 3 years, I spent the majority of my time on the ice in my own zone, picking the puck out of the net and giving it to the referee. We had a real tough time defensively, and we didn't make the playoffs in the 3 years that I was there. And so that still doesn't leave a very good taste in my mouth. But living in New York was so incredible. The energy. I was there during 9/11 and went through that whole experience with the city and saw how incredibly resilient and tough the people of New York were, and got an opportunity to spend some time with Port Authority, NYPD, NYFD, and I'll never forget that first game that we played after 9/11 and seeing all the first responders and police and firemen were on the ice. And, we actually played Buffalo and both teams had New York on their jerseys. So, and that
was the iconic picture with Mark Messier putting on the FDNY helmet, right?
Yeah. It was pretty wild to be a part of that. So,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So, you talked about earlier some of your personal challenges and struggles with mom and dad, and how hockey was an outlet for you to kind of stay kind of the course and get in your 10,000 hours. When you ended up moving on to the higher levels, did you feel that hockey continued to help you deal with those challenges, or did it actually add more pressure to your situation because of it?
I always prided myself as a guy who could handle a lot of pressure. And when the game's close, I wanted the puck on my stick, and have that opportunity to help the team win. But as I got older, I started taking a look at my past with my parents. And then also, I'm a sexual abuse survivor as well. And, when I was in New York, I started to take a look at that stuff because I was struggling with addiction as a coping mechanism to sort of suppress these negative emotions that I was experiencing at the time. And really, that's when my mental illness showed up, is when I was in New York. And so focusing on the off-ice stuff and then still trying to manage the on-ice stuff became quite a challenge. And what was that, like almost 20 years ago, I was in New York, and nobody was talking about mental health at that time, and especially in the hockey world.
Right.
And so, I really struggled off and on when I was in New York. And, I started going to treatment facilities and was doing a lot of therapy and a whole bunch of stuff. And ultimately in 2003, I got kicked out of the NHL because of my behavior. And so I left the game, and 16 years ago, I had a fully loaded pistol in my mouth, ready to pull the trigger and end my life, not because I wanted to die, but because I was completely exhausted from living in, emotional pain and suffering for the majority of my life. And I tried everything on the planet to get rid of this. And then it wasn't too long after that failed suicide attempt that I got sober.
Right.
And I've been sober now for a little over 15 years. And what's happened because of my sobriety is it put me in this place where I sort of live on a daily basis. And that's in the field of trauma, mental health, and addiction. And I've been in this space now for 13 years. And like I said, I'm an author as well. I've written a couple books. I've probably done 800 speeches all over North America talking about the subject of trauma, mental health, and addiction. And I also belong to a global mental health organization in New York called We're All a Little Crazy. And we have a weekly podcast that we do talking about mental illness. And so it's probably been the most rewarding part of my life. And I'm now looked at as a leader in the space of trauma, mental health, and addiction. And I've helped millions of people come to grips with their own traumatic experiences and
Sure.
And all that.
So let me share this with you, because I don't know that we've had any conversation. I don't even know that I would say you don't even know this about me. But number one is thank you for sharing your story, and you'll understand even more so in a minute. But I sit on the national board for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which is the leader in suicide prevention and mental health.
Yeah.
And I have for, I guess, the past 12 years. I lost my brother-in-law in 2004 to suicide, which many of our listeners know. And I've become a staunch advocate for mental health and suicide prevention for those reasons.
Wow.
And we've had an impact. My wife and I together, with the support of a lot of people, have raised over $1.7 million for the organization.
Amazing.
We've helped a lot of research. So this is something that's very important to me. And I think one of the things is, and I think one of the biggest things, as you mentioned earlier, is, 20 years ago, people weren't talking about this at all.
No.
Zero,
Yeah.
Nothing, especially sports organizations, kind of got brushed under the rug as much as possible. But a lot of that's changing. I feel like we're in the midst of some of the best changes in the mental health space that we've seen, at least since I've been involved. And I credit a lot of that to people like you and the Michael Phelps of the world and the other football players that have come out recently and are talking about Solomon Thomas, who's now with the LA Raiders, talking about their own struggles, Dak Prescott. I mean, the list is going on and on. I mean, 20 years ago, we had a list of maybe one. But when people like you are coming out, who were in the limelight, leaders, looked up to, and athletes, I think it's so helpful to get that conversation out in the open, because people can identify and say, hey, I'm having a similar struggle. If he got help, and he went for support and is willing to talk about this, why shouldn't I?
Right.
And it's people like you that I feel are really opening up that conversation more so than ever. And I applaud you and thank you for that, because I'm sure you're impacting millions of people. And some of it you realize, and a lot of it you don't, because you'll never hear from those people.
Absolutely.
So you don't have it very often where you have somebody who had the success that you had as a professional athlete. And this is the Midland money mindset. So how important is it as an athlete and your mental health? How important is it to have that, to remain focused, especially as an athlete at your level?
Well, I would say that 5% is ability and 95% is what's between your ears. And the most successful athletes in the world have that other 95%. And when you get to the highest levels, everybody can play. Everybody can skate. Everybody can pass. Everybody can shoot, all that. And what separates the average guys from the elite guys is mental attitude, mental health, all that stuff, right? And because I had faced a lot of adversity early on in life, it built a lot of resilience in me. And that resilience is what carried me through my whole entire life, is that I have sort of this built-in mechanism that no matter what you throw at me, I will figure it out and I will end up coming out on top because of that. And so, when I speak to people about mental health, I take a different angle, and pain is the greatest motivator that we have for change. Sure. And although it feels really uncomfortable, I see it as an opportunity to learn and as an opportunity to grow. And I would say also that trauma plays a role in mental illness and addiction. I come at mental illness and addiction issues from the place of trauma, because trauma, when we experience trauma, whatever that looks like, it doesn't have to be as extreme as mine. I would say the whole entire planet at some point in their life is going to experience trauma.
Sure.
And that trauma leaves us in emotional pain and suffering. And that emotional pain and suffering is what I call mental illness. So how do we deal with this sort of pain that nobody can see, right? Nobody can see emotional pain, right?
Right.
And those of us who have it, we're really good at wearing lipstick, I call it. Right? When we leave the front doors, we're dressed well. When people approach us and ask us how we are, we say fine or good,
Because that's what we're supposed to say, right?
And so how do we deal with it? Well, we tend to gravitate towards the dark side of life and get involved in addictions, right? Drugs, alcohol, food, sex, gambling, workaholism, whatever it is. And we use addiction as a coping mechanism to suppress or numb out from, those negative emotions. But in my case, eventually you get to the place where you got to decide, am I going to die or am I going to live? And I wanted to live. But I knew if I continued down the road and down the path that I was going down, that death was going to be the ultimate sacrifice.
Right.
And because I wanted to live, I really became vulnerable. And I really believe that that's the key to all of this. And it's having conversations like this where we're able to talk about our trauma that really helps people come to grips with their own, or it helps them find the courage and the strength to talk about their own trauma. Because I would say that trauma, mental health, and addiction is the biggest epidemic on the planet. Okay. Bigger than COVID. It's way bigger than COVID.
Well, it was a problem before COVID and it'll be a problem after for sure.
And we haven't really done a great job in the space of creating safe environments for people to talk about this stuff. And so when a guy like me or an NFL football player or a Michael Phelps comes out and says, I'm really struggling, that's vulnerability. That's courage, right?
Agreed.
And what that courage does, because courage is contagious, is it allows other people or gives other people the permission to be able to talk about what they need to talk about. And another thing I find is there is not enough skill in the professional world of mental illness. There's not enough skilled people to help with the epidemic, right? There's so many people that are struggling that the mental health system is completely run over, right? And instead of being proactive, we're being reactive in the space. And hence we have the epidemic of mental illness on the planet. And then you throw COVID into the mix, and COVID is the most traumatic event that's happened since World War II. So for a guy like me who's already had trauma, just added another layer of trauma. And so at the beginning of COVID, I really struggled with my mental illness, depression hit and my anxiety was really high and all that. And so thank God I had a toolbox full of tools that I use on a daily basis to sort of keep my mental illness at bay. But it's been a difficult time. And I've dealt more in the suicide space in the last probably 8 or 9 months than I have the whole 13 years I've been in this space. And so that's hard work, and it's not fun to have to work with people who are thinking about, taking their own lives.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things that I hear you referred to as is an agent of change, right?
Yes.
And what I want to do is kind of give our listeners an idea of something they can take away from our conversation, implement today, and potentially improve their mental health.
Yeah.
Are there a couple of quick takeaways that we could leave with the listeners that are easy to implement, something they can turn off this show today and kind of implement to help improve their mental health and be on the path to positive change?
I would say the biggest discovery that I've sort of had is that you can't do this on your own. It's absolutely impossible to do it on your own. And I often say the day I asked for help was the day I saved my own life, was the day I asked for help. And it doesn't mean you're weak if you ask for help. It actually means you're a person of tremendous courage and character. So that's one of the biggest steps you can take, is realizing, I can't do this on my own. And you can't outthink it. You cannot outthink it.
It's just as easy as you have to, you need help. You need somebody to walk you through this.
Because I'm a very smart, intelligent guy, and I try to outthink it.
Right.
And obviously struggled because I thought I could do it on my own, or I thought I was a tough guy.
Right.
And of all the things that's brought me to my knees, that was it. I consider myself to be, a tough SOB, but on the other side of the coin, I also look at myself as being vulnerable. And that's a big key to all of this too, but the stigma is so thick in this space that you can almost cut it with a knife. And as an advocate and as an activist in the space, every day, that's all I do is fight stigma, is try to educate the media as to how to talk to and talk about mental illness. And what's really frustrating is, you have all of these mental health campaigns and they all start with the tagline 1 in 5 or 1 in 4, right? And I think that only adds to the stigma. Okay. Because I say to myself, why are we shaming the one person who has mental illness? And in my experience and in my research, it's 5 and 5. It's all of us. At some point in your life, you're going to have some sort of whatever with mental health. And so we need to change the conversation. And that's what I try and do every single day is change the conversation and take a holistic approach to mental illness, because there are 10,000 different ways to heal from mental illness.
Right.
And it's up to you to do your own research and find your own personal formula that helps you sort of live life on life's terms. And there's so much great stuff out there. There's all kinds of wearable stuff now that can help. There is music stuff that's incredible, and then your basic exercise, eating well, sleeping well, yoga, meditation, all of these things that are sort of considered foo-foo should be part of your own personal formula.
Yeah. And if you don't try it, right, you don't know if it works. Yeah. So, I mean, for me, if I do yoga, it may work, it may not, but until I try it and commit to it for a period of time, I really don't know if it works or not. So you got to kind of navigate that whole space and figure out what works best for you. Yeah. And at the end of the day, what's making you feel better and not worse. Yeah. And you got to commit to it for a period of time.
And I always say, find your tribe, right? Because you can't do this alone.
Right. Well, that was your point number one, right? I think that's the biggest takeaway.
And, I've been in this space for a long time. And the cheapest, most effective kind of therapy that doesn't cost much or anything at all is a little thing called group therapy, where you get a bunch of people in a room who are all struggling and you use vulnerability to create safety. And then once you have safety in the room, people just start popping up and telling their stories. And really, for me, that's the number one step in this whole entire process is using your voice and talking about either your trauma or your daily struggle. And everybody in the room understands, where there's no judgment, there's no pointing the fingers, there's none of that. It's just compassion, empathy, and love. And that's, for me, one of the most effective ways to help with whatever struggle you have.
Yeah, that's a great point. And again, it's one of those things that, again, until you try it and you're not going to see the value of it, if you're going to sit back and judge whether it's good or not, it's not really going to tell you if it is. So you might as well give it a try. And it, a lot of people, I would imagine, maybe even yourself, go into that thinking, oh, this isn't going to help me. And then after a short period of time, you start realizing, hey, you know what? I feel a little bit better telling the story and sharing and being open.
I run an online group twice a month where we talk about trauma, mental health, and addiction. And we have 200 members. And it's some of the most incredible conversations that I'm able to facilitate between people and around people. So it's fantastic.
That's awesome. So listen, what's up next for Theo Fleury? What's the next big thing? Anything in the works?
Yeah, I always got lots of stuff in the works. I'm a sort of a serial entrepreneur. So my main focus now is in the mental health space. And I think the next big wave and the next big turn in mental health is going to come from the psychedelic world. There's so much incredible research coming out of, microdosing different substances that, we used in the addiction space for a long time.
Right.
But
it's ironic how that works.
Yeah,
right?
it's kind of crazy. But it's, I would say, in the last 8 months, I've never had more phone calls from different psychedelic companies that are looking for me to be a spokesperson or investor or whatever it is. And so Right now, I think everybody's going through the process of trials and getting this stuff legalized. There are a lot of great, amazing doctors who have jumped on board.
Mm-hmm. I know that this has been a big topic at AFSP in regards to the research that's been going on in this area for probably the last 5 or 10 years. Mm-hmm. And now we're starting to see some of those outcomes coming out and some of those papers being written. And there's a lot of substantive information that's coming from these trials and whatnot. So it's going to be interesting to see. I think you're going to see a lot of changes coming in the next 1 to 3 to 5 years in this area that
it's going to change mental health. It's going to absolutely change mental health and have a significant impact.
Well, we'll have to use this as a place marker for that and look back on that. Yeah. So Theo, it's been a pleasure having you on the show, and we end every show asking all of our guests the same question, and that is, what did you do today that brought you joy and put you in the right mindset for success?
Well, every day, I get an opportunity to work and live in this space, and I get an opportunity to help somebody. Helping is healing. Obviously, the more people I've helped, the more I've healed myself. It's that simple, and so I've put myself out there. And God has not failed me once. In the last 13 years, there's always somebody who reaches out and is asking for help. And so that's what gets me out of bed. That's what, brings me peace, joy, happiness, and serenity, is the ability to take somebody who's broken and help them rebuild their lives.
Awesome. Very admirable work. And I'm sure as much as you help them, you're helping yourself. So it's a true win-win, and sounds like something great to wake up to each and every day.
It is.
And Theo, with that, it's been a pleasure having you on. We're going to have the information in the show notes. But if folks want to reach out to you, learn more about you, learn more about Fleury 14, what's the best way for them to do that?
So my website is theofleury.life, and I'm on all social media platforms. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at Theo Fleury 14. Send me a private message and I'll get back to you within probably an hour. So.
Great. Well, listen, thanks again, Theo. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. And remember, make it a great day. I want to thank Theo Fleury for being a guest on the Mitlin Money Mindset. Theo has taken his career, an impressive one at that, as an NHL hockey player and is using it as a platform to help others today. Theo struggled during his career and life and now has made a commitment to help others pursue excellence in all areas of life. He is just another great example of how sharing personal experiences can help mental health struggles come out of the darkness and into the light. Theo shows those that suffer from mental illness and/or depression that it's okay to seek help and proactively work to get better, and that is extremely admirable. Theo can be found across all social media platforms, and all the contact information needed to find him can be found in the show notes. Thank you for joining us this week on the Mitlin Money Mindset. Make sure you visit our website at mitlinmoneymindset.com and smash the subscribe button so you don't miss a show. We encourage you to help others find our valuable content, and please don't keep us a secret. You can also schedule an Is There a Fit call right from our website or by using the link that you'll find in the description section of your podcast player or app. And be sure to join us for our next episode to learn more about getting your mind right when it comes to all things money.
The opinions voiced in the Mitlin Money Mindset Show with Lawrence Sprung are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal. No strategy ensures success or protects against loss. To determine what may be appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, accountant, financial or tax advisor prior to investing. Investment advisory services offered through CWM LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Guests on the Mitlin Money Mindset Show are not affiliated with CWM LLC.